I was at skating with my daughter last night, and I was bent over, putting on her skates, and I sort of moved up to get her helmet from the bench. And this man behind me, didn't know he was there, was going to hang a jacket directly over my head. And he touched me, was in my personal space, and was slightly aggressive about it. And I knew I had to record this episode. There's been this increase in my clients reporting angrier behavior from men, this increase in misogynistic views from their partners and their children. So much so that I've had several clients separate in the last couple years, sort of as we divide politically. And it is so fascinating, and I need you to make this link. It's going to be so eye-opening. But what is going on in relationships, in bedrooms, in heterosexual marriages is mirroring what's going on politically, globally. Pleasure was always political. I just didn't realize how big it was, how deep the roots went. I'm Dr. Jordan Wiggins, naturopathic doctor, author, coercive control clinician, and dominatrix trained pleasure strategist. If you're listening, you've likely been the anchor, the fixer, the emotional glue. And these aren't flaws, they are super traits. The qualities that make you successful, capable, reliable. And when those traits turn into survival, and the only way you know how to relate, you start overgiving in your relationships, careers, and it costs you your health. As a naturopathic doctor, I work with women and really smart men on optimal health and longevity. And as a pleasure strategist and coach, I also treat what labs don't measure. I help women who were taught how to survive with their super traits, teach them how to go from high achievers to receivers using the pleasure-centered method. When I first started, I thought I was writing about women's bodies, women's hormones. When I wrote The Pink Canary and started the Pleasure Collective in 2019, but I didn't yet understand that I was also going to be writing about pleasure, power, politics. They're all one and the same. And if you cannot see and you cannot link, and by the end of this episode, you'll be able to, how my interaction with that man last night at skating, with what is going on in your relationships or in your lack of relationships, if you are a single superwoman, and what is going on globally and politically. Okay, and this is not political as in political parties. This is about how power over shows up everywhere. And if there is one thing destroying the intimacy and connection in your relationship and the health and well-being of women everywhere, well, and technically the global population everywhere, it is power over. Okay, this is in our health, this is in our relationships, and it is affecting you. If you are living, breathing, and have a pussy or love someone with a pussy, this affects you. My entry point into doing what I do was not sex, and it wasn't relationships. It was women's health. Okay, women that were doing everything right, eating well, exercising, successful. They were compliant with my treatment recommendations, but they were still exhausted, still couldn't sleep, still disconnected, anhedonic, like not as happy as they should be, knowing that there was something missing in their personal lives and relationships. And these women were generally gaslit by the medical system, having our symptoms dismissed, having our treatment delayed, our feelings minimized, especially around women's sexual health and hormones. This is an actual thing. And if you are in the wellness universe online at all, you'll know that The Women's Health Initiative, published in 2002, scared generations of women away from hormone replacement therapy. I feel the worst for the boomers. They were significantly impacted by this. Women told to just wait it out, accept how it is. Symptoms are normalized, or they were given, antidepressants when they needed hormone. Okay. And we know clinically, for example, the number one killer, like leading cause of death in women, is cardiovascular disease. And we know that hormone replacement therapy, when prescribed properly, prevents cardiovascular disease. And it was withheld or fear-mongered away from women for decades. So just let that land a little bit. You might think it's a coincidence. And in the past, I might have had a little, one bad study went rogue, but it's bigger than that. So women were withheld care, their symptoms were dismissed, and health outcomes, and especially quality of life, worsened. Women were peeing themselves, had such pain with sex they wouldn't have sex. Their marriages were suffering, moods, hot flashes, like just insanity. And when we lived until 50, maybe that made sense. But with our life expectancy being so much longer and having so little medical research done on women and women's health concerns and women's pain, we have a fundamental problem here. It's a system centered around men, created for men. And then our bodies are treated like broken versions of men's bodies. So that was sort of my first issue that I championed, was women's health and women's sexual health, because I felt like they deserved, and still do deserve, an adequate quality and standard of care to men. And men deserve that same adequate quality of care. When I have male patients and, let's do the testing and look at things that prevent erectile dysfunction and cardiovascular disease and increase longevity when you're in your 30s. Like, let's not wait until you're 50 and something's wrong. Let's prevent that. Okay, so I came into this about health and seeing how there was a patriarchal system that had power over women's health and well-being, and they were denied access to care, and their thoughts were minimized, and symptoms were minimized, pain was minimized. And this is research proven, okay? This isn't my opinion. And you all have Google and ChatGPT. So if you want to Google like ER wait times for women, or the length of time that it takes women to get a diagnosis of endometriosis or PCOS, like, it's just, this isn't even a conversation or anything that you could deny or refute. These are well researched and documented facts. So I came into it from health. And then when I was providing, and when I do still provide adequate healthcare for women and smart men, if you live in Ontario, I would love to have you as a patient. When providing adequate care for women, adequate testing, adequate treatment, adequate support, then I started to realize there was a different problem, another layer, shall I say. Okay, so a canary, the pink canary, a canary in a coal mine doesn't die because it is weak or there is something flawed with it. It dies because the environment is toxic. Women's loss of pleasure, libido, vitality was not the problem. You are not the problem. You're not broken. Women's loss of pleasure, libido, and vitality is the warning signal that something else is wrong. Something else is going on. Okay? When the environment is unsafe, the most sensitive systems fail first. Okay? And that's why they used canaries to save the workers in the mines. Okay? But in mines, in bodies, in society, right, our most vulnerable sense it first, have the biggest impact first. And our reproduction, our desire, our vitality, that is going to sink when there is a lack of safety. Those pleasure centers are going to turn off. I wrote the pink canary because I couldn't ignore those patterns anymore. And I'm talking about the stress, the burnout, the medical gaslighting, the hormone imbalance, the fact that men's pleasure was the focus for so long. And I do feel like that has changed or is starting to change since 2019. And I could see the collapse and I could see what it had done to women's bodies because I helped treat over 2,000 patients. But I did not quite have language for the architecture or the systems that were in place to help create it. So even as a naturopathic doctor, when somebody has trained me to look for root causes, I was still underestimating the impact of power and control or coercive control. So what I see now is how the same power dynamics that were harming women's health are at play on a greater scale. And if we think about it, if we look at gender roles and the fact that women are expected to be responsible for the emotional tone of a relationship and do all of the emotional labor and unpaid labor, that's a power dynamic. That is where we are meant to function in a system with power over us, where we give more than we receive. And then the other thing is that we're not even taught to look for this or talk about it. Okay, so let's break this down. And this is where it gets juicy. And I have a tingle talking about these things. And I've also lost clients talking about these things because they still want power over their partners. They don't see a problem with having power over others in social systems. So needless to say, we don't really jive anymore. Pleasure requires choice. Okay. It requires autonomy. And just thinking about that, it arouses me. It excites me. Okay. And autonomy only exists when power is shared or it is consensually given. And this is where my intersection, my dominatrix training and my coercive control training meet and help me teach my clients and you some really cool stuff. And I realize that saying cool makes me sound millennial as hell. So you cannot really have pleasure without choice. And what does that mean? That's having a true yes and a true no. And we've had conversations about consent, and we've had conversations about learning what we desire so that we can say, yes, more of that, please. And yeah, I tried that and it's really not for me. Any system that restricts autonomy will always restrict pleasure. And that is systems that rely on someone or something having power over something else. And that is inherently what healthcare is. The doctors and the pharmaceutical companies, like they're in government policy even, are the gatekeepers of how healthcare is delivered and who has access to it. And in some countries, it's better than others, but it's all very hierarchical. You know what I mean? Okay, and some examples. So there is control over reproduction. We could have many, many conversations about that. And I remember thinking initially when I went to one of those marches, those pink hat marches, this is a long time ago, but I remember thinking that it was almost even performative because women's reproductive rights were never going to be taken away. Like that was just crazy, and how wrong I was. And I think with some shame and humiliation of how people of color, minorities, especially women of color, they have been warning us and talking to us about this. And a lot of us white women have had our heads inserted firmly in our asses. I see it now. I started seeing it 3 or 4 years ago. And I wish that it did not take me having to go through the family court system and having my autonomy and rights taken away to realize this for myself, to understand power and control and coercive control for myself. But here we are. So any system that restricts autonomy and restricts choice restricts pleasure. So let's think about this. If some days you want to have sex with your partner, but they don't want to have sex with you. So they say no, and it hurts you. So they don't want to say no because they don't want to hurt you. So if they don't really have a no, if you don't really have a true yes and a true no in your relationship, you do not have safety. That is the foundation of a pleasure-centered relationship, safety and autonomy. So other ways that we control is moralization of women's bodies, right? So a woman's virginity is taken by a man. We talk about women with daddy, like, oh, she has daddy issues, but we're not actually talking about the fact that it was the man that left and did not handle his responsibilities that created the daddy issues. We're blaming the woman. We're blaming the victim, expecting women to be the emotional caretakers, expecting her to endure and tolerate in relationships. So the marriage benefit imbalance. So we are taught to tolerate, which is a super trait, instead of choose our desires, our yeses, our nos. We're taught to tolerate. And that is what I did at the arena last night. I was alone. I was there with my daughter. I had a moment of jujitsu instinct of handling it. I had a moment of gaslighting myself where I thought, no, like, he must not have meant to do it. It would have been an accident. But he didn't apologize. And when I sort of stared him down after, like, he definitely knew what he did and it was intentional. And anyways, there just seems to be an increase in aggressive male behavior, driving, personal space things. I have clients telling me all the time that it just seems like there's this increased aggression towards women. And we feel less safe. And when you take away our choice, you take away our personal space, and you wonder why we don't want to be married to you anymore, or why we don't want to have sex anymore, why we're not connected. And a shout out to the men that have been booking VIP days with me, because there are men that inherently want to learn the ways that they are privileged, the ways that try to have power over the women in their lives and why it's not working out for them. Because there are men that do want to learn and they're amazing. But a big part of this lie is that our feelings are too much. We're too hormonal, too controlling, too emotional. And he has the right to his feelings the way he thinks it. And we center relationships around the dick who doesn't want to take any accountability for the way he makes people feel or his lack of emotional depth and accountability. So we have parallel processes going on. We have how things play out in systems and how things play out in sex and relationships. So when I talk about coercive control and I talk about power over another, I'm not talking about bad people. I'm talking about systems that train behavior. Okay, and once you see this pattern, you're going to recognize it everywhere, and you're going to be like me, and you're going to be like, how did I not see this before? How am I such an intelligent, educated person that didn't see it before? Because I was trained in systems. I was trained in patriarchal, misogynistic systems. So are your therapists. So are your doctors. So is heterosexual marriage, okay? So in coercive systems, in systems that want control, that want power, obedience is the key, okay? And it's almost moralized, right? You're not just following rules, you're responsible, you're reasonable, you're mature, okay? All the things that we were taught while we were being ingrained with our super traits, okay? Good patients don't Google their symptoms. Good girls, good wives, we don't make waves, we don't ask for too much. We're the cool girls, we don't need anything, okay? Makes us more controllable. So, and if you resist, if you ask questions, if you speak up, then you're reckless, you're too much. So systems don't even have to punish us directly. They just have to make disobedience or feelings feel irresponsible. And we might do these things to our children, right? It's so ingrained. So if their feelings feel too much for us or we don't have time for them, we're just pulling a heavy and we're wanting their obedience. And when people challenge power, the response isn't curiosity, it's containment, right? We're threatening the order or unstable or emotional. And this is even why women have been scared to do my work. They'll get on a call with me and know, like, you're speaking to me. This is exactly what I know I need. And they're scared to do that next step. Because if they focus on pleasure, they're taught that it's going to be unstable or the bottom's going to fall out. It's scary, that pleasure needs to be contained. I need to be contained. And we're taught as women with super traits to keep everyone around us emotionally happy and satisfied, that not agreeing is dangerous. So we go silent, we shrink, we ask for crumbs. And over time, relationships become extractive. We don't want to have sex. And then do you think that it is a coincidence that the divorce rate is on the rise? The number of single women that are not, like, they don't want to get married. They realize that heterosexual marriage is not necessarily the flex anymore. Being happy is, having pleasure is, whatever that looks like to you. Okay, and control, like, it's insidious, and it's generally framed, it's not sold as control, it's sold as protection or care. Okay, things are for our safety, or if you ever somebody that's trying to control you, they're just trying to help with their advice, but really they're trying to manipulate an outcome. And I've had so many clients, they're in hospital and they're handed a bunch of pills and they're not even told what it is they're supposed to be taking. So care without consent is always control. And then we see the same patterns in relationships. And now this is going to hit closer to home. So in relationships with power dynamics, coercive relationships, which is what they are, and we just need to start calling it what it is. And if it is too much or too triggering, and I know at one point this would have been too triggering for me to hear when I was in a coercive relationship, but I needed to. I needed to before I spent years and hundreds of thousands of dollars on therapy and coaches and personal development that never dealt with the root issue. And I've done that work so you don't have to. In coercive relationships, love is measuring how easy you are to manage, right? The good girl, the cool girl. And this looks like going along to keep the peace, waiting to have a conversation because you're not sure how he's going to react, agreeing so that the tension doesn't build or that you can end the silent treatment that you've had for 3 days. Okay, saying yes so that connection isn't withdrawn, love isn't withdrawn. We are not rewarded for being honest and truthful and having feelings. And all of those things are foundations for the best sex of your life, the best relationships of your life. We are not rewarded for being honest. We're rewarded for being agreeable. Okay, so over time, your nervous system learns that love requires self-erasing. Hello, super traits. This is how they were created, and they were created by design so we could be of service to others. And all of us we were all raised as good girls, but we were raised as good girls, and then we were going to put on our superwoman capes. But I'm going to earn my own money, so I don't need anybody. And I won't have to ask for help, or I'll be able to hire help. But we still end up erased. And it's almost worse because we have the time and we have the money, and other people might not. So they can blame their unhappiness on not having those other freedoms. But when you have the freedoms and the result is still the same, it hurts on a different level. So when someone has more power, their needs are kind of the baseline. And when you have less power, your needs are excessive. So when our partners or male partners ask, like, why is everything about you? Why can't you just relax? How come you're never satisfied? Pathologizing somebody's needs is the fastest way to silence someone. And it is the fastest way to shut down her desire. So if you are not being met emotionally, If your partner does not want to learn the skills of emotional attunement, you don't have a pleasure-centered relationship. You have a him-centered relationship. And when we have super traits, it's so easy for us to do. And no one is looking here because we are accomplished, because we have degrees and accolades and successes. No one realizes that in the bedroom and in relationship, this is the dynamic that's going on. Once a woman doubts the legitimacy of her own needs and her own desires, control is effortless. She's given away her power. And then we dress it up, right? We think we're being mature. They think that being tolerant, being forgiving, taking the high road, relationships are hard work. But anything that requires chronic self-abandonment and requires us to give up our own autonomy and sexual sovereignty is not maturity, it's conditioning. So both in systems, both in relationships, in sex, the goal is the same. Not connection, not care, but compliance. Compliance that we are gaslit into thinking is voluntary. And that's why women with super traits blame themselves, because the system trained us to. And then we spend all this time and money trying to fix the wrong problem. Okay, super traits are not personality quirks. They are survival traits by design. Empathy, responsibility, loyalty, tolerance, hard work. These traits allow us to survive in systems that were never built for mutuality. That's why we have an orgasm gap. But systems that rely on women over functioning cannot last. It's what you see going on right now. Okay, women aren't leaving marriages because we suddenly got selfish or, I don't know, whatever the red pill manosphere is saying. The cost is too great, and women are recognizing it. The cost is health, our health. Okay, literally, we know this. Single women are living longer, happier, and having better sex. The cost is desire. The cost is joy. The cost is autonomy and sovereignty. Okay, our body is not waiting for politics to change or our personal ideologies and worldviews to change. It is responding to the environment. It is the pink canary. And before women leave marriages, their bodies check out first. And this can be with a diagnosis. It can be with libido shutdown. So pleasure was always political. We were just not supposed to notice and not supposed to draw parallels to what is going on globally and in government and in systems and compare it to what is going on in our bedrooms and in relationships. But it is the same.